Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, long time no see. In this project I'm going to make myself a new PC desk and I'm going to start off with the tabletop. I'm going to use construction lumber as I'm showing here. As always with all the projects, I'm first going to get a reference face done as I'm showing here, and what I usually do is I first try to take out the cup of the wood. So I start in the middle there and then work it down so that it will be flat all over. To check how much of the cup or the hill I have to remove, I'm using this long spirit gauge in order to see how flat the top is. And as you can see here, it's not yet flat enough, so I'm just going to continue removing more. After I've taken out the majority of the cup, it's now time to test the twistness of the board using my level sticks here. And as you can see, it's obviously twisted, so I'm removing the high corners on each side. Usually with rough wood, I would do it in iteration stages, first reducing the cup, then reducing the twist, and then rechecking the cup and checking the twist again until I'm satisfied. For the other side of the face, I have to remove quite a lot of stock to get to the correct thickness on all ends. So here I'm using my scrub plane to remove the majority of the waste on the wood before I will go down to a normal plane and just get it in line with the rest of the opposite face that we just flattened. Once I'm done with both faces of the board, I go to one of the sides of the board and make it square with my main face, as you can see here. Once again, I'm using the long spirit level to see how much bump or how much of the heel I have to take off before it gets straight. Once the side face is now in line with the main face, I'm using a marking gauge to get the correct width of the board at the end of the day. After the gauge line, I'm using my planes again to get the waste out of the way, which will lead us to a plank that has now a consistent width all throughout. All that's left to do now is to square the end pieces with our main face and our side face. This will be done for all of the planks that I showed in the beginning. Once all the individual planks have been prepared like that, as shown with the one plank, it's now time for glue up. But before we do that, I clamp two planks together and then square them off or plane them off with the same faces that's going to be glued together. This will make for a good tight or seamless joint at the end of the day. Here all the boards are now being glued up with my clamps, which will take about 24 hours to fully dry. After gluing the boards together, I'm just making sure the edges are nice and aligned with each other. I try to make it square with one of the main faces, but it doesn't have to be perfectly squared, just so long as it looks good at the end of the day. To finish off the top, I'm going to give the bottom and top part a chamfer. This is to avoid getting injured by sharp edges, as well as to protect the tabletop if you bump into it so it doesn't split or get dent very easily. And it also looks nice at the end of the day. So initially for my PC desk I wanted to make legs from scratch, but I had this old table standing in storage doing nothing, and I thought this was perfect to inquire with my tabletop that I've made. So as you can see here I'm actually showing where I want to put the tabletop on top of the legs. What is also nice, these are the original buttons that came with the legs that held up the previous tabletop. I'm just reusing it here, as you can see, and just fitting it into the tabletop or to the new tabletop where it's going to be. If this is the first time you're seeing this, it might seem odd, but these buttons actually help with movement of the tabletop, not to restrict the tabletop fully, so it can actually move and bend as it absorbs moisture throughout the seasons, and basically to avoid cracks. Now, one big problem with this leg set is that my legs always bump on this section that I'm showing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a outcut in it as I'm showing here. So I'm cutting out grooves, or I'm going to cut out here to remove the majority of the waste with a chisel. After removing the majority of the waste with the chisel, I'm just now smoothing down this part where my legs are going to be under. This will make it much easier to get in and out at the end of the day and not bump my legs continuously. A nice sand down to make sure all the grooves and everything that was left behind are out, as well as to give a little bit of a chamfer on the side so it doesn't have a sharp edge, is all that's needed. Another thing I decided to do was to secure the back part of the table legs so that they can't flare out. The old table had one in the middle, if you can see the holes there, but my legs are going to be there, so I decided I want to make a piece at the back and going to dovetail it at the end of the day. So here I'm just sawing out the piece that I'm going to need from some old scrap wood that was lying around. As mentioned before, I'm going to use dovetails, or in this case half lap dovetails, to the table legs. After completing the dovetails on the brace piece, I've penciled out where it must lie onto the table side. So here I'm just carving out the half lap dovetail where it's going to fit in. This is not to glue up yet, this is just to test it to see if the piece will fit before I apply final glue to it. And after testing both sides of the table, here is the glued in piece that will keep the legs from flaring out just in case, and making the whole structure more secure at the end of the day so it doesn't wiggle. Now this whole time, if you watch this, you might have thought, well, that's all nice and well, but aren't the colors going to clash with each other? You've got like pine wood, some stained wood, and then some other light wood. It's just going to look a little bit silly. So I decided at the end of the day to paint everything black with a polyester type paint. I usually use a spray gun for this, but I decided I want to up my brushing skills, which is quite convenient when you want to work in the weekdays when you can't have the compressor running. And finally, here we have the completed structure with everything painted black and put into place where I want to put the PC. However, I'm not done yet. I still need to put a top part where I can put the monitor on and speakers, as well as store stuff underneath. That still needs to be done. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope to see you in the next video where I will be completing the top part of the table. Cheers!